Hey, what's up guys? We're going to be building a mean stack application. We're going to be using Angular 2. That's going to be kind of the focus of this series is how Angular 2 comes together with Node.js. So really quick, I'm going to show you what we're going to be building. We're going to have a register page, login page, and then we're also going to have a feed. And basically users can post statuses here, and you can view comments from other people. You can also view who's disliked it and who's liked that post. You can also like or dislike yourself. And then you can also click on the individual profiles of who disliked it. You can also post your own comment. Okay, and you can see that here. And then you can, of course, also create new blog posts. You can edit your blog post. And lastly, you can also delete your blog post. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to need is a GitHub account because we're going to be utilizing Git throughout this application. So you want to go ahead and sign up and create your own profile here. And then you also want to download Git. Now Git is basically the UI tool for Git. Okay, and Git is basically a version control, and it allows you to basically control large projects and collaborate and things like that. Okay, and I'm going to be running through the basic functions of Git. Okay, so once you have that installed, you want to go over to your terminal and you want to make sure that it's working by typing in git version. Okay, now if it is correctly installed, then you should see a version pop up there. Okay, the other thing we're going to need is Node.js, and that's going to run our server, our backend. So same thing, you want to install this. Pretty straightforward depending on what system you have. And then once you have that, you want to go ahead and test that by typing in node-v. And you want to make sure that you're getting the version here. If you're not getting that, that means it's not properly installed. Okay, then once you're at your GitHub account and you've logged in, you want to hit new repository. Then you want to name this repository something related to your app. So I'll say mean stack with Angular 2 tutorial. Kind of long, but whatever. And then just hit create repository. Now this right here is going to tell you all the command line functions that you'll need to map to this application. Okay. So I'm just going to copy that first command and I'm going to go into my directory and I'm going to paste that in there. So what this does is it creates a file, right? So that's what we're doing with echo here, and readme.md, that's going to be the name of the file. And then whatever's in quotations here is going to be inside the actual file. Okay. So if we hit enter and then we go into our project, you'll see a new file here created, right? And it has everything here that we're going to need. Okay, so then going back, we're going to go ahead and do these next three here. Okay, and I'm just going to put these side by side so it's a little bit easier to read. Okay, so the first one we're going to do is git init. Okay, and that's going to initialize the local repository. Okay, then what we're going to do is if you type in git status, it tells you the status of this repository. Right now it's saying, hey, you made a modification with this file right here, but you haven't committed it yet. You're not preparing it before you push it to GitHub, right? And so the way you do that is with this command right here, the git commit. So we'll just copy that and paste that here. And so what this is git commit, and M is for message, right? So what message do you want to attach to this? What description, basically, okay? So normally you'd put something here like update to a bug or something like that, or whatever it is that you're changing or added a new feature. But for the first commit, we can just use first commit because it's self-explanatory, okay? Hit enter. Oh, actually, I forgot to add the files. You must add the file first here, right? So this one is saying git add readme, right? So going back to git status, it shows you all the files that are untracked, right? So for right now, it's only the readme file. So you could just add it directly like that, git add readme. But an easier way to do it is just type in git add and then a period. And what that'll do is it'll add every single file that you need to commit, okay? Rather than doing it by name. And then now we can go ahead and type in git commit m and then first commit. Okay, and there we go. We inserted our first commit. Now we need to add, do this step right here, remote add origin. And what that does is it basically links our local repository to the GitHub page, okay? Okay, we can go ahead and do that. And then we're finally ready to push this, right? So we'll push that in there. And what this does is it pushes the origin to the master. Okay, so if you hit refresh here on the page, you can see now that here is our README file, and here it is displayed in the actual window, okay? So that's how you do a push, okay? So now that we did that, we're ready to go ahead and start building our application. Okay, so now before we start building our server, what we need to do is create a new branch. You never want to work off of the master branch. You basically want to create your own branch, and then once you've completed that and tested it, then you want to merge it into the master, right? So what we do that is we just type in get checkout -b, and then we name it whatever we want. So we'll say, we'll say server setup. Okay. And now you'll notice in the parentheses it says server setup. That's because that's what branch we're on. So you can do that by typing in git branch, and it tells you all the branches we have. And you can see here that we're on server setup, the main one, right? Whoops. So now we can go ahead and type in npm init to initialize our application, right? It's going to ask us some configuration questions, right? The first one is what's going to be the name of your application. We're going to use the default. In the default versions, we're basically going to use the defaults for everything. Description, I'm just going to say mean stack with Angular 2. Entry point, that's going to be where your server is running, where the application starts, which is, we're just going to leave that on default index.js. We're not going to use test commands for this. There's our Git repository. And then any keywords that we want. And then I'll just say mean stack, Angular 2, application. Then author, I'm just going to put myself. No license, and then I'm just going to hit yes. Okay, now if you go over to your code editor, you can see the new file that was created here, okay? Let me actually shrink this down a bit. There we go. Okay, so now this basically is the configuration for the Node applications. Right, it just tells Node what dependencies is going to need, what's going to be the entry file, any scripts that we're going to use, which repository. So it basically just feeds all this information to the Node app, okay? So actually, going back to this, if you remember, we said that our entry point was going to be index.js. So let's go ahead and create that now. Okay, so now what we need to do is go ahead and build our server. So then we're going to be using Express.js, which is a framework for Node.js. And we'll just copy this for the installation. Okay, then we'll paste that in there and hit save. Okay, so now if we don't use this save, the installation will still work, but what will happen is, if you go over to your package.json file, you'll notice down at the bottom we have a dependency now. So now anytime this application gets installed anywhere else, it's going to know, the platform is going to know, hey, Express is a dependency for this application, and it's automatically going to install it when you run npm install. Okay, so say for example we didn't use --save when we were installing it, right? Let's say we didn't do that. Well, Express would still work in this application, but if we move this to another folder or ran it somewhere else, deployed it, or someone else runs our application, for example, it's going to crash. It's not going to work because it's not going to know that it needs Express. And what's going to happen is it's going to run the files, and it's going to try to run Express, but it's going to fail because it's not installed, because we didn't tell it we needed it. And that's basically what we're doing here. Okay. So if you go back over to the Express website and hit API, we can go ahead and start to build this, right? So we can just copy this right here and paste it in here. Now I'm going to be using the latest ES6 syntax, but you're welcome to use the old one. Okay, then I'm going to go back and I'm going to use this example here. I'm going to paste it here. And then I'm just going to update this syntax to the latest, like I was saying. And so instead of 3000, I'm going to change this to 8080. But I also want a message so that I know this is working, right? So I'm just going to say console log listening on port 8080, right? And this is so that I'll know that the server is actually running. Otherwise, you're not going to get any indication or any message in the terminal. Okay. So basically what we're doing here is we're pulling in the Express package, okay? Then we're initializing an Express application and saving it in the variable or the const app, okay? And then we can use it in our application, right? So anytime the user sends a GET request, so GET is a type of request, right? We're going to respond with something, anything we want. In this case, we're just sending hello world to the browser, okay? And so this / this // that just indicates home page, right? We can say home, and then it'd have to be home, okay? And then right here, we're just telling the server to listen on the port 8080, okay? And so what that looks like is http / localhost 8080, okay? So let's go ahead and hit save on that. Then let's go back over to our package.json. And what we want to do is set up a script here to start our application, right? So we'll just say start, and then we'll say node index.js, right? So whenever we run start, it's going to run node on the index.js file. So let's go ahead and see that in action. Let's go back into our terminal, and we'll say npm start. Okay, and there we go. We have our message that says listening on port 8080. Okay, so let's go ahead and go over to that. And remember again, that's localhost :8080, depending on what port you chose. Okay, and then you see our message there, hello world. Okay, now if we make a change to this, so let's say I do hello world with h1 tags, and we hit save. You'll notice that if we hit refresh, nothing happens. That's because we have to restart the server, right? And you do that by pressing Control-C. It asks you if you want to terminate. You hit yes, okay? And then you basically run the command again. And then now you'll notice it updated. Now that can be really tedious, so we'll need to use something to fix that. So what we're going to use is node mon, right? And so this is a global utility that allows us to not have to refresh the server, basically, okay? And so this is how you install it. So you just run this in your terminal and go ahead and stop the server. And so what the -g means is it installs it globally, meaning not in just this application. It installs it in every application going forward. So anytime that you're creating a new project, you'll have this package available to you already. And we don't need to save it because this is not a dependency. The application doesn't need this to run. This is just a utility for us, okay? So I already have it installed, so I'm not going to do that. So now you can type in node mon index.js. Okay, it's going to run the same thing, only now it's a bit different, right? So let me go ahead and hit refresh and make sure this is running, and then I'm going to make a small change here, right? So I'm going to say David, and then I'm going to hit save. Now if you hit refresh, there you go, you have the change. And if you look at your terminal, it's because it automatically restarted anytime that you make any change to any of the files. It's automatically going to restart the server, the backend, okay? So, and that's what we want. That just makes it easier for development. And now you'll notice if you type in / anything, you're going to get this error that says cannot get, right? And that's because we only have one route configured here, right? But we don't need any more than one route for the server. We only need one route. So what we can do is change this to an asterisk. And so now no matter what route the users go to, they will get this message, okay? So let's go ahead and see that in action. Now if you hit refresh, you'll see hello world, and you can type in anything. No matter what, it's going to redirect to the hello world. Now we want that so that we can make sure that the users are only accessing one specific area, right? Our server, of course. Okay, so now what we need to do is install the Mongo database, right? This is the database that goes along with the main stack, okay? And so it's pretty easy to install. Once you install it, what you'll need to do is go to your terminal, and this really varies depending on what system you're using. If you're using Windows, then it's pretty straightforward. All you need to do is change directory into the location where it's installed, right? So for me, it was program files, MongoDB, server, the version, and then bin. Once you're in that folder, then what you want to do is run mongod or mongod. Okay, and that'll run an instance of your Mongo database, and it tells me right here, waiting for connections on port 27017. Okay, and so that's how I know my server's running. Now, if you're running Mac, Linux, something like that, it's a little bit different, so you'll want to search for that specific operating system. Now, using the database here in the command line, it's very doable, but it can also get kind of tedious having to remember all the different commands. So what you can do is you can actually download a RoboMongo, which is a user interface for the Mongo database. And so the way it works, after you download it and install it, and I believe this is available for almost all operating systems, but once you download it and install it, once you have your Mongo database server running, you open up RoboMongo, and on the left here, you'll see all of your databases. And you can actually go to an individual database and look at your information and look at all the users, and rather than having to do it all in the command line. Okay. So now we need a tool within our application that's going to handle all the Mongo database commands. So we're going to use Mongoose, right? Mongoose is a package for dealing with Mongo database in Node.js, right? And it's really, really easy to use. It's probably the best one out there right now. So we're just going to copy this top portion, and then we're going to paste it up here. Okay, so same thing. I'm going to change this to ES6 syntax. And then I'm going to add something here. I'm going to say mongoose.promise equals global promise. Okay, and this is just a configuration issue with Mongoose. It's just something to add. Even if you don't add it, no big deal, but you will get a message in your terminal that warns you. So you want to go ahead and add that. So I'm going to cut this out here. And I'm going to add a new folder. I'm going to name it config. And so normally what you do in this config file for a main stack app is you configure 3 different environments, right? You configure the default environment, the production environment, and then the development environment. And you have different database for each one and different configuration settings, etc. But that's going to take a really long time to do, so I'm just going to create one file, and that's going to be database.js. But I'm just letting you know so that you know that's sort of what we're going for here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a JSON object, and I'm going to have 3 fields here. So I'm going to say URI. I'm going to paste that one that I cut out. I'm going to have a secret, and it's going to be blank for right now, and then a database. So what this secret is basically some kind of secret code encryption to use throughout our application. We can make it whatever we want, but you don't want to make it something easy. And we're going to use that for various things like tokens and stuff like that. And that's going to be how our server can decrypt something and know that it's ours because of that secret. It's going to be attached to all of them. Okay. So I'm just going to delete this here. And so, like I was saying before, it depends on your operating system, but normally it'll tell you what port you're listening on. I'm just going to go ahead and stop the database altogether and just run it again so I can see what port it was. And then you'll see right there, waiting for connections on port 27017. Okay, so then I'm just going to add that here. I'm going to say 27017. Okay, then our database, we're going to name it whatever we want. For this, I'm going to say mean Angular 2. And then, so up here, I'm going to concatenate it, and I'm going to say this.db. Okay. And then, so for the secret, we're going to use a tool to create the secret rather than creating it manually. And so what we're going to use is something that already comes with Node, which is crypto. Okay. And I'm going to go down and I'm going to use, let me just search it here, random bytes method. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this and paste it here at the top. Now I'm going to customize this a little bit because we're not going to need all of this the way that we're using this. So I actually don't need anything here, except we do want to convert it to a string, so I am going to keep that. Okay, and then I'm just going to bring this up here. Okay, so now we can assign that here, and we can say crypto. Okay, so now what we need to do is export this file. The way you do that with Node modules is you just type in module exports. Okay, and that's it. So in doing this, we're exporting the entire object. Okay, so all we need to do now is go into our index and import it, right? So we'll say const, and we'll name it config. We'll say require config database. Okay, so there we go. That's how we import that module, and we assign it to the const of config. So now we can connect here. We can say config.uri. So we're connecting to this URI. And then I'm going to add some configuration to check for any errors. So if there is an error, I want to log that to the terminal so I'll know, and I'll say could not connect to database, and here's my error. Else I'm going to log connected to database, and then I'm going to have the name of the database. So it's going to be config.db, and remember we getting that from right here. So okay, so let's go ahead and test that out. And so going back to the application, oh, we actually forgot to install Mongoose, so we'll do that really quick. And we'll just say npm install Mongoose, and then we'll hit save. Okay, now we can go ahead and start up our server again. And you'll see right there we get a message that says connected to database, and then the name of our database. Now I'm going to go ahead and stop my Mongo server. Just because I want to test out the error, make sure that I in fact get one. Okay, so I'm just going to type in rs for restart. Okay, and there you go. We get our message, right? That could not connect to database, and then here's our object, which is the actual error, and it tells us all the specifics. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start it back up. Then I'm just going to clear all this and start the server back up. Now, one last thing that I want to do is I actually want to test this secret and make sure that it converted properly. So I'm just going to paste that up here. I'm going to say console log config secret. And as soon as you hit save, it should log it automatically. And there you go. We have a huge secret there that we can use. Okay, so we don't need to keep that in there. We can go ahead and just delete that. Okay, so now we're ready to go ahead and start installing all of the Angular 2. So what we'll need is the Angular CLI, which is command line tool. And this basically does all the work for you when it comes to installing Angular 2 applications. You can create it from scratch, but it's a pain in the ass, and you really don't need to, because you'll end up creating the exact files that this comes with. And this basically just installs like a very basic Angular 2 template. So it's not like it's just flooded with files or anything. It just comes with like the basic files you would need for an Angular 2 app. So it's not so bad. Okay, so what I'll do is I'm going to stop the server for right now, and then I'm going to type in npm install global angular/CLI. Okay, and that's what we got from the website here, installing it global. Once you do that, it'll let you use the Angular CLI in any folder in any project. Okay, so this is all we need to do right here to install the application. And then what we do is change directory into that application, and then we do ngserve. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that right now. So I'm going to do all of those together. And so what I'll do is I'll say ng new. I'm going to name our Angular 2 application client. Then I'm going to say cd client. Then I'm going to say and ngserve. Okay. And that's going to take a little while. Okay, so once that's done, what it does, ngserve compiles the entire Angular 2 application and minifies everything. And so that's what you see down here. And it starts also a live development server, which you can access right here, localhost 4200. So let's go ahead and do that. And you'll see right there we have our app works. So let's take a look at what we have inside the actual Angular application. I'm going to close this out. And so if you go into the client folder, you see some things here. You see the package.json file, which is similar to the one that we created before, except Angular 2 has way more dependencies. Okay. Then we have our node modules that are only used in for the Angular 2 app. Okay, we're not going to get into E2E. Oops, didn't mean that. Our source folder holds the bulk of the application, the main component. And so our index file is the main page that you see here on the client side, right? And actually, we can get rid of this loading part, and then we can change this to Angular 2. Now, one thing you will notice is anytime you make any changes, because you're on a live development server with ngserve, it automatically updates, right? So you'll see here I updated the title, and up here it says Angular 2. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on. So if we go into app, we have one component here, and then we have app.module. Now, module is the main configuration file. Basically, it's the kind of like package.json. It tells the application everything that you need. All the modules that you're using, all the components, all the providers, etc. So you're not going to do a lot here except import stuff. So let's go ahead and close that out. Now, the way Angular 2 works, everything is broken up into components, right? A page is a component, navigation bar is a component, like everything, all different parts of the page of the website are components, right? And so we have one default component that's installed, right? And so let's go ahead and open app.component.ts, right? TS standing for TypeScript, because of course Angular 2 is written in TypeScript. So we have a few things here. First, we're importing the component module from Angular, okay, and we need that for every component. And then we have three properties here. We have the selector, okay, and this basically tells the HTML, hey, where do I put this component? So if you go back into the index, you'll see that selector right here, app root. So therefore, it takes this component and it injects it into this selector. Okay, and so that's how components work in Angular 2. And this is what it injects. It injects this HTML page, which is right here, along with the CSS, which there's no styling right now, but we'll get to that later. Okay, so now if you open up the HTML, you'll see that all that's here is an h1 tag with title. Okay, so where's this title coming from and how is it getting app works? Well, it's getting that from the component.ts file. Anything that you export here is going to be available in the rest of the application, right? So for example, we're exporting title. So that's why we can access it here, title, because we assigned it at work. So we can change this. We can say hello world from Angular 2. And then as soon as we hit save, it'll recompile. And then there we go. Hello from Angular 2. Okay, and then if you go back over to the server side, you'll notice it's still actually running. Of course, if you didn't close out your server. If you did, it's not going to be running, obviously. But what I'm trying to point out is that both the servers are running simultaneously, right? And so that's how you're going to develop with Angular 2 in the mean stack. You're going to have both environments running. You're going to have a server for the back end and a server for the front end, okay? And that will allow you to develop a lot easier. And then what you'll do at the end, once you're ready to deploy, is you're going to compile, you're going to build the application's front end. And then you're going to connect that to the back end. Okay, and I'm going to demonstrate that so it makes a little bit more sense, right? So let me close all of this. Okay, so the server needs a way to connect to the Angular 2, right? So what we'll do is, remember, ng-serve is just development only. So we just, I just turned that off, right? Stop the server. And so now what I'm going to do is ng-build, okay? And so that means we're ready to build the production. We're ready to compile everything, minify everything, and put it all together and create a nice folder for production, okay? Now, if you go into, let's see where it's at, Angular CLI.json, it tells you right here where it's compiling this from, okay? So it tells you right here the root is going to be the src folder, which is what we were just looking at, the application. The out directory is dist folder, and you'll see that right here. It just created this folder, okay? And if you look inside this folder, it has compiled everything and bundled everything up to give us a fresh, new, production-ready app, okay? And we're not going to get into the rest of this just yet, okay? So now that we've created a production-ready file, what we can do is, well, I was going to say stop the server, but we already did that. But now we need to connect to that using Node, okay? So what we'll do is instead of sending hello world, we'll send this index file, right? So we're going to need to do one thing. First, we're going to provide access to this directory, right? So the way we do that is with app.use. And we say express.static, we say directory name plus client dist, okay? And then we're going to change this, so like I was saying before, instead of sending hello world, we'll send a file, and we do that with send file. Then we're going to say path.join directory name plus client dist, and then the index.html file, okay? Now this path is this is already included in Node, but we still need to call it in up here. So we'll say const path require path. Okay, so there we go. We've connected to this index file. Okay, and then you can see here our index file basically looks similar to the one in our development folders, except that it's got a few different JavaScript down here, and this is all minified, bundled up files to make our application run smoother and faster. Okay, so let's go ahead over to our terminal, and then we can start up, make sure you back out into the main directory and then start up your server. Okay, and then this one's not going to work anymore because we stopped that server, so you get an error. But you want to go back over to the 8080 and then hit refresh. And you'll see now that we get our application, right? So we're running the Angular 2 application, and we're just using the 8080 port, right? We're not using the development server anymore, okay? And so that's how you feed Angular 2 to mean stack, to node server. Okay, so the last thing that we need to do is we need to push all of these changes to our GitHub page. So if you recall, this is what our GitHub page looks like. We just have that README file, okay? So let's go ahead and we can stop the server. And then let's just type in git status, right? And it tells you here that we got some new changes. We have some files that were modified, but they haven't been committed yet. So what we need to do is git add and then space period to git add all. Okay, then git status, and then you're going to see now they're all green, which means they've been added and they're ready for committing. Okay, so we can just hit git commit. Now, before I do that, actually, make sure that you're working off of the side branch that we created, which is git server. So we'll hit git commit. We'll say server setup. Okay, and then if we hit git status, okay, we're ready to push this up. So to do that, we type in git push all -- all origin. Okay, once that's done, go back over to the GitHub page and just hit refresh. Okay, so your master branch is not going to have anything, but notice here it says you recently pushed a new branch. So let's check that branch out. So this has all of our files, right? And you can see here it has our message that we set up. So once you're ready to push this to the master, to the main application, then this is what you'll do, right? So we're ready to do that now. So let's just go ahead and do it. So if you type in git branch, it'll tell you that we're on this branch. So let's switch over to the master. We'll say git checkout master. Okay, so now we're on the master branch. And so now what we need to do is merge over the server setup branch, right? So we'll say git merge server setup. Okay, now it adds everything to the master. So if you hit git status, it tells you this branch is ahead by 1 commit. So that means we're ready to push everything. So we'll just type in git push. Okay, so now if we go into the main page, you'll see here now all of our files are there. Okay, and so we can go back and we can look at our branches, and you can keep that for record if you want, or you can delete it. And so what we'll do throughout the course is we'll create new branches for every piece, every component that we work on. That way, if something messes up, something goes wrong, you could always just revert back to a branch, or you can delete something and not merge it, unmerge, whatever you need to do. This basically is your source of version control. Okay, so that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching.